Good morning, Dot Tone Dan again here. It may be evening by the time you watch this. I get some files. I just got a bunch of files yesterday that a friend of mine was wanted me to look at, and their customer was uploading them into the gang builder, and they weren't getting sized right. And so the reason being is there's always something in the file that is causing it to read excess image area. And that's the same with this file that I have today that I got this morning. And so when I take a look at it, if I was to make a selection, so the first thing that you do really is if you have Photoshop, and if you don't, you should get it, but make a selection by holding down the control key or the command key on a Mac and make a selection of everything in that layer. And it's supposed to be translucent already. So background is transparent, nothing's supposed to be in there. But I suspect that there is something in this background. So when I go to the crop tool, it should crop it down to my selection that has everything in it. So when I do click on the crop tool, it shows me that it's still selecting the entire document size, not the actual image size. Document size is that all that empty space that's out there. And so, yeah, you can manually crop it down, but then you don't know if you're getting in everything. So if you just, drag it up to the space and kind of come in a little closer, you don't know if you're getting everything or not. Because there might be something that's hanging out here that you need to get. So what I like to do is come into after I make this selection, you can do this one of two ways. You can make a selection and then come into channels. If you don't have channels window open, you go to Windows, drag down to the channels in alphabetical order. You see that there? Click on that, and then your window will be out here floating around. And I drag them together, and as soon as you can drag those together, you can see that highlight, and that'll show that that's going to drop right next to the other windows that I have. So there's my swatches, my paths, and layers. I like to keep my layers and channels next to each other. And so I need to make a selection. I'll delete this one because I already did that. So I'm making a selection of it, come into channels, create a new channel next to the trash can here. And if it's showing up as black, as solid black, that's only because you have it on masked areas. And masked areas is like working with the black background. Essentially, I'll show you the reverse of that. And then you'd have to fill this with white. And so you can work in this. It's kind of like working in reverse, but I like to work in selected areas. That's kind of working in a positive form. Um, so now that we have that selection filled on a new channel, I like to go to either layers or curves. But in this case, I'm just making an extreme example. So I'm going to use levels. So you would go to image, adjust, levels, or Control L, Command L on a Mac. And you see this, that's the solid content. It's clear over here on solid. So that's showing you with your eyedropper that this is 100% solid. But some areas are only 99. Right there. So you beef this over. I say beef, I'm filling it in more, beefing it up. And that would make that artwork solid. Okay. Now you move it around and it stays on 100% here in my info window. Again, under Windows, you go to I for info. So you can see the percentages of what that is. You'll use this because up in the edge of your artwork, you may have percentages of color. So that says out there on the outer edge here, that's reading 4% and 2%. That will cause issues with your underbase and your glue. You see, you can actually select certain percentages that's saying that there's no percentage there, but it's recognizing some kind of percentage. Um, what I want to do is adjust the levels and drag this over. You see how it's got something in the highlights here. So I can either burn it out. Well, that's what I'll do later, but I want to show you where it's at. So if you drag over, you'll see more and more that there's something in that artwork. If we blow up more on the edge of this, you can see there's a lot of pixel junk on the outer edges there. So we'll want to clean that up. And then there's also these almost like scan lines. And I don't know if this is an AI thing, but I'll drag this over all the way to the right and you can kind of see where all those extra pixels are. So this is like a fact-finding mission. You've got junk hidden in the background that you can't see. This is how you locate it. My friend was suggesting that, and he owns a DTF shop. He's printing DTF film every day, and he runs into these issues for people. And he was telling me that, you can use the eraser tool and some of these like background remover eraser. And you can do that, but it doesn't always do a great job. It's not the best method that I would suggest. Because when you're using the eraser tool in here, even on a white background, well, I need to not erase the white, so that's part of the problem. If I just use the eraser tool and I click in certain areas down here, you can't see. You don't know if you're getting everything. So that's part of the problem, again. So if I use the eraser tool and erase down on the outside here, I don't know if I'm getting into any part of my edge of my actual artwork. It's just not a perfect way of getting rid of them. So let's fill that on this channel with black in the foreground and adjust the sliders again. And I can see up here, even with the eraser tool, I still did not, for some reason, erase everything that was in there. Don't know why. Maybe that's part of the preferences. I have it on 50% tolerance. But if you're using the eraser tool, you might have some preference with that, some adjustments to make in here to get that more fine-tuned. But I don't find it to be that beneficial. So again, this looks identical to my first one. And as you look, there's some down here as well. And I'm sure that if I was to use the eyedropper with the plus sign and click on that to leave a plus sign identifier so I can reference what percentage that is or color, then I come over and it's reading nothing here on my K, but if I come over top of it in the RGB file, I don't know why, but that's reading 100% solid black, and that's not right. And it's reading a CMYK percentage, which is odd. I've never come across that, but you can tell that there's something there. And if I make a selection of it again and come into a new channel, and fill it, it's definitely not filling it as black, but you see now in grayscale form, it's reading it as 1% dots. Can't blow up on it any further than that, but it's reading it, it's there. And if we adjust that level, you'll see that fill back in again. So it's just another way of identifying where your problems are. So here's what we're going to do on an original. We'll make a selection of the art, come in and fill it. And what we want to do is get a pretty good crisp edge on the actual art here and not play around with all the junk on the outside white edges. So we're going to fill that in solid there for the shadow tones. That'll fill in any 99%. And then we're going to open this up and what I call burning open that percentage there. And that's definitely going to get rid of that 1% because even a little click over here is just going to get rid of 1%. But we're getting rid of all the extra junk that's out there too. And now if I was to adjust levels on this, you would see that there's nothing on the outer edge. So I've cleaned that up. And this would be a little too hard on the edges, a little stark. But that's the thing with DTF is anti-aliasing or softer edges kind of help the print to look a little better. This is my adjusted level. I went back and I undid that. Undo. And this softer edge kind of works best for DTF versus having the hard edge, which at 300 resolution is a little more noticeable as a hard edge. And so it looks, you can see the stair steps on when you've got something. If it's a straight line, I'm reducing down. If it's a straight line, it looks perfect, nice and straight. But as it bends, it causes that stair step look, and that is noticeable at print size at 100 or at 300 resolution. 600 resolution files, you're not going to notice it as much. And I use 600 resolution files for DTF sometimes. So I wanted to say, stepping back again, this softer edge here is a little bit better for DTFs because they look a little smoother. The glue and the ink kind of muddle this up, and it's almost, by the time it prints, it's almost like a little blur, and I'll represent that here. A little bit of a Gaussian blur. That's too much of an example. About something like that. Maybe that might be a little too much. Maybe right where I had it to begin with was the best. But this is what it ends up with. When I give you something that looks like that, in print, with the inks combined and the white underbase and the glue, it kind of softens up on the edges and looks a little bit like that. So anyway, now I would come and make a selection of it, holding down the control key or the command key, make it and clicking on the channel itself, then go back to the RGBs, reverse your selection. Because right now, if I painted in the live area, it's painting on the inside, acting like a mask. So I want to paint on the outside. So I reverse my selection, inverse. I think you would find that under select, inverse. And that is Shift Control I or Shift Command I on a Mac. So I'm doing the keyboard reverse, Shift Control I, and now everything on the outside is what I'm activating or affecting. And then I hit delete. Doesn't matter, you can hit it a second time if you like. just to make sure. And that's going to make sure that there's nothing in that arc. So if I make a selection of it again, come back into channels, fill it on there, and adjust levels, you'll see that I'm not getting any percentages out there. Drug it all the way over, and I'm looking at that reference point again, and there's nothing there. 0 percentages. And that means there's no junk on the outer edge here as well. Remember how we adjusted levels on the first one? And I don't know if that's, no. Yeah, I already deleted it out, but there was extra junk along the edges right here. That was debris that would cause you problems on the DTF also. So this is tightening up a good file for your DTF image. So these two you don't need now. You can delete those. And now that you've made your selection, you can select every pixel on there and crop it down to the actual edges of the pixel. And you see how much that comes in much closer. It's reaching over here to the edge of the star and the edge of this white part of the circle. And that's the only thing that's going to print. Now, I do like to stay away from the edges when I crop, so then I'll expand that a little bit. Hit enter, and my file is ready to go. Well, first I do need to make sure that it's the actual size that it needs to be. So when I do the crop, I'll come back and reverse that, come back down to this edge of the pixels, and then I'll resize it properly. And that is going under image size. And then, oh, that's at 96 resolution also. So we want that at 300. So I'm going to change this to 9.5. That's the size that I need. And I'm going to keep resample on and preserve details, and then change this to 300. And you'll see that does a pretty good job. And actually also the resampling and the preserved details, you'll see cleans up the edges of the type and whatnot a little bit more. Makes it a little more tight and consistent. So that's when you got the file pretty close to the original size, it kind of upsamples. And so this method here, Preserve Details 2.0, is, and you'll see that there's many other options here. If I use Smoother for enlargement, it still makes it a little fuzzy, but it's better than the current resolution, which looks a little pixelated still. And so this one is better, but Preserve Details 2.0 is a much better method because it cleans up the edges, makes it look nice and tight. So click OK. You got your 300 resolution. That's at the correct size. And now, like I said, I do like to give it a little extra space so that we're not butt up against the edge there. And then I'll save. And this file, nothing else in the channels. If there was, then I couldn't save as a PNG. Since this is in full color RGB, in layers, I can now save, and it's an RGB and it's transparent. Everything is hunky-dory, copacetic. We're ready to fly. And that's it. Thank you much.